To soak the mounds of wreckage at what was the World Trade Center. It's turned the dust to mud and complicated the already dangerous rescue and recovery operations that are going on around the clock.
President Bush will see those efforts firsthand when he travels to New York this afternoon. He'll do so after attending a prayer service on this National Day of Remembrance.
It's early this Thursday morning, the 14th of September, 2001.
From New York City, this is a special edition of The Early Show, Attack on America, with Bryant Gumbel and Jane Clayson.
Across the continent of Europe, the sound of silence. 43 nations, 800 million people reach across the Atlantic, forming a bridge of grief just an hour ago for the uncounted victims of the attack on America. And good morning. Welcome to a special edition of The Early Show on this Friday morning here with Jane Clayson. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We're now 3 days removed from the events, and they are no less emotional.
People around the world joining in the grief that we feel as Americans here. At least overnight, this rain is real troubling for the people who are involved in the rescue efforts. Makes the debris more unstable, and the possibility of hypothermia setting in if there are people still alive in that rubble.
Yeah, and in fact, it brought for a time a halt to some of the search and rescue efforts down there, and also there's some bits of bad news coming out also that it turns out that those firefighters that we thought had come out of there earlier, that turned out to be a false report. Instead, it was simply a couple of firefighters that had fallen through the debris and who we knew were alive when they went in there. So the news continues to be bad.
Let's get the latest this morning. President Bush has declared this Friday a National Day of Prayer and Remembrance. As we've noted, he'll travel to New York this afternoon to tour the World Trade Center wreckage. He's expected somewhere around 4 o'clock. As for the death toll, authorities now believe it could top 5,000. Investigators have recovered the black boxes from the hijacked planes that went down at the Pentagon and in Pennsylvania. The ban on commercial flights has been lifted, but travel has been slowed by some tough new security measures. And for the first time, Secretary of State Colin Powell has called Osama bin Laden a prime suspect in Tuesday's attacks. As we mentioned earlier, searchers this morning have recovered both black boxes from the hijacked plane that crashed at the Pentagon. Bob Orr is in Washington this morning with the latest on that. Bob, good morning.
Well, good morning, Jane. This could be a bit of good news, although I want to caution everyone that it's going to take some time to know whether or not the discovery of these boxes really leads us anywhere in the investigation. We were told that at about 3:40 this morning, the search teams at the Pentagon were able to go into that charred debris, that rubble pile, and retrieve both of the black boxes from American Airlines Flight 77. The conditions of the boxes, at least on visual inspection, I'm told, is not too bad. The cockpit voice recorder is described as somewhat damaged on the outside, and the flight data recorder has a charred exterior. But for the most part, at least the early indication is these boxes may be in reasonably good shape. These will be taken, or have already been taken, I should say, to the NTSB lab in Washington, where the FBI and other experts will read out the data, and it'll be some time before we know whether or not that's helpful. Also, about the Pennsylvania crash, they have recovered one of the two black boxes from the United Airlines Flight 93 that went down in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. This is the flight data recorder, and it will tell us exactly what the airplane itself was doing in its final moments. But it will not tell us what was going on board. That will come from the cockpit voice recorder. And in all of these crashes, investigators really want to know, first and foremost, what was happening in the cockpit. If these recorders are in good working condition, if the data was retained through the impact of the crashes, then we might know what the hostages and the hijackers and the pilots were saying. There could be some valuable clues there about possible targets. And then finally, as this investigation side continues, there's the other problem of trying to get the aviation system up and running again. Yesterday, the ban, as you mentioned, was lifted, and a number of airports did open for limited flights. But I must tell you, there are a number of major airports, including the New York airports, Boston's Logan, Washington's Reagan National. Those remain closed, and the system is so jittery that any little new concern, any precaution is going to take the system back down again, because at this point in time, the federal authorities have made it very, very clear they will put up with the disruption and the economic loss to make sure everyone remains as safe as possible. Jane?
Bob Orr in Washington. Bob, thank you. On Thursday, the Justice Department announced that it has identified all 18 hijackers who took over the 4 planes that crashed on Tuesday. But they're still following thousands of leads in what has become the largest criminal investigation in U.S. history. Jim Stewart, also in Washington this morning with the latest on that. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Jane. The real news here this morning is that there have been no arrests, despite reports throughout the night that groups of people have been taken into custody in connection with Tuesday's attack apparently are unfounded. There have been no arrests as yet for anyone directly believed involved in Tuesday's attack. We need to also clear up some reports here that there have been another attempted hijacking at New York's JFK Airport. There were published reports that 2 groups of men attempted to hijack an aircraft there last night. That is not true. There were reports that men armed with knives were caught on board aircraft at John F. Kennedy Airport. That is not true. What we are told is that at least 1 man is in custody, perhaps as many as 10 others are being questioned, and what they are in violation of could range from anything from INS violations to fake identities, any number of things, but I don't sense anyone believing that they are directly involved with Tuesday's attack. What authorities are looking for this morning is what they were looking for late last night, and that is the flight school aviation training class records in Florida and elsewhere to see who else might have been accompanying the 18 men who were involved in Tuesday's attack. The clear impression I have from federal authorities is that they are not convinced that there are still not terrorist pilots possibly somewhere in the United States. And finally, this morning, we will see the pictures and have the identities confirmed of the 18 hijackers aboard the 4 aircraft on Tuesday. The FBI will release what in essence will be, Jane, a video perp walk. We can only hope that this is not the end of that, but right now these are the only people that we know for sure were involved in this, and they, of course, are dead. Jane.
All right, Jim Stewart, many thanks for your good reporting. 7:07, Bryant.
All right, Jane. President Bush says the unprecedented attack on our nation has completely changed the priorities of his administration. Bill Plant is at the White House with more on that. Bill, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. This is indeed a defining moment for George W. Bush. He is, in fact, preparing the nation for war. And as he does that, the White House itself has come under increased security. They've pushed the perimeter out several blocks in all directions. Nobody without a government ID gets through, even as a pedestrian. That led to some massive traffic backups in Washington last night because there's no traffic on several of the major streets. Security officials won't say, but the street closings most likely reflect new concerns that there could still be other terrorists out there. Stranded motorists moved only with the help of police, including military police. They're very evident on many major routes here in their Humvees. The vice president has gone to Camp David. His staff says that it's simply a reasonable precaution not to have the president and vice president both in the same place at the same time. They say he will be back on the weekend. The president, of course, has designated today a national day of mourning, and he will attend a service at the Washington National Cathedral and then go to New York City to go there to the scene of the awful crime and to visit with the rescue workers, the survivors, all the people who are on the scene. Brian?
Bill, can you give us the timetable of that service and the president's visit here in New York?
President goes to the Washington National Cathedral at noon Eastern Time. He's expected in New York City somewhere around 4 p.m. Eastern.
All right. Bill Plant at the White House. Bill, thanks. We'll talk later. Senator Joseph Biden is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's on Capitol Hill. Senator, good morning.
Good morning, Brian. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. As the president and all of his administration seeks to build a coalition preparing for the day when retaliation comes, you had a big meeting last night, I understand, with the head of the Pakistani Secret Service. What can you tell us of that meeting?
Well, it's their counterpart to our CIA, Bryant, and it went incredibly well. Quite frankly, I had long discussions with the State Department and the Secretary of State and with Mr. Armitage, who had met with him already before I met, so I knew what had already transpired. And the bottom line was, I told them what they told them. They've got to choose sides. There is no question. You're either our friend or you're our enemy here. And I am confident that this is at least the second most powerful, if not the most powerful man in Pakistan. They will be cooperative in every way. That's a very positive part of building the remainder of this coalition to be able to deal with what I hope, Brian, is not the beginning and the end of our way of life, but the beginning and the end of the way of life of these terrorist organizations.
I don't mean to throw water on it, but as cooperative as he promised he'd be, how much can you count on the idea of Pakistanis leaders being able to control their intelligence operatives and their military people?
Well, this guy's pretty tough fella. This guy's not a shrinking violet, number one. Number two, quite frankly, Bryant, it's a matter of which pain they want to endure. They need us in the end of the day. They don't want to be isolated as a pariah state. They don't want to be put on the terrorism list. They don't want to be put in a position where their near-term future is in doubt. And that will be the case if, in fact, they choose not to cooperate with us. So, look, obviously, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. We'll see. But I think that what the administration has done, particularly Colin Powell, in generating what may be the most significant consensus on dealing with organized terrorism than the world has ever seen, is we have to assume we're going to be able to do that. And we have to keep pressing forward with this coalition. And but again, Bryant, you know, I don't want to be Pollyannish about this or naive, but I truly think we're on the brink of being able to make a significant change in the way terrorists are able to operate worldwide.
Allies are standing with us, and NATO has passed an Article 5 resolution. If and when there is retaliation, do you see our allies taking an active role in that retaliation?
I do. Now, when I say active role, if you say, do I know at this moment, or anyone know, that if there's going to be 10 or 10,000 or 100,000 troops used, if that comes to the case, how many will be NATO allies? I don't want to guess about that, but they will fully, totally participate in everything from intelligence capability, I suspect the logistics, as well as, I expect there'll be manpower as well. And I also think, Bryant, you'll see cooperation you haven't seen from moderate Arab states. The Secretary of State has been keeping me informed. He has had significant progress, at least in his verbal exchanges. People are beginning to figure this out, Bryant. They're either with us or they're against us. They're either part of the civilized world or they're not. And I mean, when North Korea, I don't expect anything from North Korea. When North Korea passes, when the Kim Jong-il sends his condolences and talks about wanting to, you know, he's on the terrorist list.
Right.
There's a change coming. I don't know how big it will be, but there's a change.
Final note, you said on the Senate floor that you see this as the beginning of the end of organized terrorist activity. Is it realistic to think, even at this time, that we can ultimately put an end to the violence enacted in the name of whatever fanatic there is?
Well, let me make a distinction here. Let's assume this is bin Laden, and I'm not prepared to, and I'm not authorized to say that at this moment. But let's assume it's bin Laden. He needed a very wide and thorough network. He needed some state sponsorship. He needed a whole lot of land in which to have an encampment and train folks. And that's one type of terrorism. And the idea of someone strapping bombs to their body and walking into a restaurant and blowing themselves up, we're never going to be able to stop that fully. So I want to make a distinction. Terrorist act versus terrorist networks. And what we have to fear the most is the organized terrorist networks.
All right. Senator Joe Biden, always a pleasure.
Thank
you, Senator. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian.
7:13. Jane?
Thanks, Brian. 184 deaths have been confirmed at the site of the World Trade Center attack, but an estimated 4,700 people are still missing there and feared buried under the rubble. Our national correspondent John Frankel has been monitoring the rescue and recovery effort. John, good morning.
Good morning, Jane. Well, it is raining lightly right now, although that is expected to pick up as the morning goes on, so we don't know how that is going to hamper the efforts. We know that they are still working right now, at least on the perimeter area. We've seen some torches at work on the big cranes. On the pile, as they call it, they had to suspend at some point because it was just too slippery for the footing, but they are still going on because there still may be survivors. Each passing night brings new faces, recharged crews, bright lights, but fading hope. In darkness or daylight, The task is the same. Do you see any progress being made, or is the mound so large and so daunting that
you can't imagine? It's just a pile, and it's everywhere.
They use torches, heavy saws, or cranes. Often, they are simply on hands and knees, scratching, clawing, and tapping.
It's unreal. It really is. Just a graveyard silence as hundreds of searchers stop, wait, and then start again.
This is now the ground floor of the World Trade Center.
There were major elevator banks in these towers. We believe if there's any people who are still trapped alive, would be inside of elevator cars in these elevator banks.
So much digging, so few results, so desperate to find survivors.
They're shaking his hand.
Thursday afternoon, the pile came to life. Spirits soared. It appeared firefighters had been saved after days under the rubble.
It was just unbelievable how the crowd reacted. Everybody started screaming, USA, USA, and it was so loud.
It turned out to be rescuers temporarily trapped while searching Thursday. The incident demonstrates just how dangerous this mission is and how great the desire to save even one life. But this is the reality.
And I still have hope.
Chris Oakes, a volunteer fireman from Harrington Park, New Jersey, is looking for his neighbor.
I just couldn't sit at home and wait.
Now he's not sure what to tell his neighbor's family. Will you go to them and tell them that you were here?
Yeah, absolutely.
And what will you tell them?
I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure. I don't want to paint the grim picture that I saw.
What they are seeing seems to be a graveyard in a graveyard. One official suggested to me that if there are survivors, maybe this rain will help keep them alive as it will give them something to drink. But another fire official told me he would be ecstatic if they found even 10 or a dozen survivors at this point. Jane?
John Frankel at Ground Zero. John, thank you. Peter Walther last saw his fiancée, Trudy Alighiero, on Tuesday morning before she headed off to her job on the 94th floor of One World Trade Center. Mr. Walther, good morning.
Good morning.
Can you even begin to explain what the last 3 days have been like?
No, it's just been, I guess I'd say it's been just a series of what feel like futile efforts to try to help, and there seems to be nothing that you can actually do to make a difference, and it's been very frustrating. People have been wonderful, the police have been wonderful, the company Marsh has been terrific. The friends, family have been incredibly supportive, and that's the only thing that keeps things sane.
What are the efforts that you're involved in to try to find Trudy? I know so many family members have told me they're going from hospital to hospital, even walking the streets of Lower Manhattan, looking for anybody.
Yeah, we've had a number of friends going around to the various hospitals trying to. We prepared some brochures, pamphlets with her photos, and going around to the various hospitals, seeing if there's anything we could do there. Spending a lot of time at the Red Cross, going through the registration process for the missing person identification, and that's about it. It doesn't seem like there's too much you can do, and you're not sure what to pray for at this point.
What's your last image, Peter, of Trudy?
Last image is at the subway station on 59th Street, and we were commuting together. I worked Midtown, so I was changing at 59th Street, and I got off the train, and I was walking down the platform. The train started to pull away, and I looked back over my shoulder, and she looked over her shoulder.
And she waved to you?
Gave me a big smile and a wave.
And when did you realize that she was in trouble?
Our office, unfortunately, has a crystal clear view of the Trade Center from the 39th floor on 6th Avenue. We look straight downtown. And I heard my secretary scream that a plane was going to hit the tower, and ran out just a second after it hit. And then I immediately ran back in the office and tried calling her on her cell phone and our office phone. I couldn't get through, so just kept trying family and friends. And then I was still in the office, then somebody screamed that a second plane had hit. I ran out, and I was staying by the phone at my secretary's desk to see what was happening and working the phone there. And then I saw the second tower collapse, and then I knew things had hit a different level, and that this was not something that was going to, leave much hope. And then saw, obviously, again, through this unfortunate view, was able to see Tower 1 collapse as well.
When you looked at that first plane hit Tower 1 where your wife was, you knew that those were the floors.
I tried not to count. You could see those top floors. The smoke was billowing off to the left, so you could still see the floors on the right. And I just, people said, what floor the plane hit? And I said, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to know. And it was pretty obvious that it was kind of right in the slot.
Do you still hold any hope?
I hold a fraction of hope. As my dad said, she's if anybody's a fighter, she's a fighter. She's a very strong, vibrant person, and she's got a lot of people pulling for her. We were sitting on the couch just 12 hours earlier, planning our honeymoon, and listening to wedding demo tapes, and so it's very surreal right now. About 90% of the time it's surreal, and about 10% of the time it hits you like a ton of bricks, and it becomes very real.
Peter, our prayers are with you as you move forward. Thank you so much for being here this morning, and we hope it's good news on the end of this.
Thank you, and if anybody sees her, please call at 212-874-1956. And if you saw her earlier in the day and she was happy, just tell me. Thanks.
Thanks, Peter, very much.
Thank you.
7:20, Bryant.
All right, Jane. Daniel Oates is the chief of police for Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the former commander of the New York Police Department's Intelligence Division. He's in Ann Arbor. Chief Oates, good morning.
Good morning.
In all your years here, did you ever envision or build a scenario like you've seen this week?
Not quite like this. We did a lot of planning for various scenarios, but I don't think we ever envisioned something like that.
Did you ever have anything even to approximate this?
Well, we had some plans on the table for if we had a major event in Lower Manhattan, sealing off Lower Manhattan and that kind of thing. But frankly, no, I don't think we really conceived that something as catastrophic as this could happen.
As you sat and watched there in Ann Arbor, was it as unbelievable to you as it was to us here that those towers could have come down in 90 minutes?
It was particularly hard for me to accept because of what happened in 1993. I think all of us in law enforcement and emergency rescue, I think maybe because the towers didn't come down in 93, I just didn't conceive of what was going to happen. When I first saw the plane hit and I saw the fires, I thought they had a real catastrophe and a large fire to put out and a lot of rescue to do. But I was really shocked to see the buildings come down.
After the bombing in 93, how much did things change from a security standpoint?
Well, I think things changed a lot in Lower Manhattan. I think the fact that the number of missing is as low as it is, in light of the fact that there were thousands and thousands more people in that area, is a sign that evacuation procedures were taken very seriously, and there were a lot of other security measures put in place. Individual security at large office towers was a lot more. There's a lot more emphasis on that after '93.
Specifically, what kinds of things were done? I mean, was the evacuation plan drastically different?
Well, I don't know specifically the evacuation plan for the towers, but I've spoken to people who had responsibilities for getting people out, and know of stories and scenarios where people left immediately upon the first incident, even if they were in a building that wasn't affected. I don't know that we would have had that consciousness before 1993.
Yeah.
So all of that is very good and speaks well to planning.
You've heard of all the complaints of intelligence failures, if there were any, at the federal level. What about at the local level? Is there blame? Should someone have seen this coming?
I don't think there's any question that this was a pretty colossal failure of the federal intelligence community. And, it's tough to say that. The truth hurts, but I think it's true. At the local level, law enforcement is very, very, very much dependent on the information we get from the federal government. We, of course, at the local level have so many other issues in policing that we have to deal with. And the nature of our society is that we rely on the federal government for information. So, New York City's paying the price for the intelligence failure of the federal government.
Are there other targets right now here in this city that you think we should be concerned about?
Well, we had done, Commissioner Safer in 1998 had commissioned a comprehensive study of vulnerability sites throughout New York so that we could do some planning. And at the time, we identified about 2,400 what we considered moderately to highly vulnerable or critical infrastructure locations. And we had done some planning as a result of that for an event like this. So, I mean, there's a lot of locations that are critical or extremely valuable to the City of New York infrastructure, and also that we had identified as really symbols of government, symbols of the United States, symbols of the city of New York, that might be possible targets. So, I mean, New York City, like any major city in the free world, is rich with terrorism targets, unfortunately.
Unfortunately. Chief Daniel Oates. Chief, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. We're moving up on 7:25 as we cut away for some viewers to go to local news. We do so with shots of mourning on what is a day of remembrance here in America.
Good morning. I'm Andrea Roan. In the news at 7:25. Here's the very latest from the Pentagon. A major break for crash investigators. Search crews have recovered both flight recorders from American Airlines Flight 77. Now, they could provide a good look at what happened during the doomed flight's last moments before it crashed into the Pentagon. The boxes are now in federal custody. President Bush is calling on the nation to come together today in memory of thousands of victims of Tuesday's terrorist attacks. He has declared today a national day of prayer and remembrance. At noon, he and Mrs. Bush will lead the nation in prayer from the Washington Cathedral, National Cathedral, in an invitation-only service. He'll be joined by other local leaders and members of Congress. Again, this is an invitation-only service. Communities across the country are also being encouraged to hold candlelight vigils later this evening, and other services will be going on around the metro area at the noontime hour. For the latest on what is happening in the aftermath of the attack, just log on to our website. It's WUSATV9.com. For the latest on what is a very complicated rush hour, here's Sherry Elliker.
Good morning, Andrea, and we're still dealing with a major problem on Route 108. Let's go to a map. This accident happened about an hour ago. 108 is closed now between Mink Hollow and Tucker. It will remain closed through the remainder of the rush hour. This is near the Montgomery County, Howard County line. What you want to do is use Edna Road and Browns Bridge Road between 650 and 216 as your alternate to get around the problem. Now let's go to Hillary now for a check on the weather. Good morning, Hillary.
Hey, quick look at our digital Doppler. We have some showers out to the west associated with cold air that's moving on in. Expect our high temperature today only near 70 degrees. We're going to have gusty winds. It is going to feel like fall. Right now it's 63 in Washington, going up close to 70.
Watch Gordon Peterson and Gravir Dinza weeknights at 6 and 11.
Last year was not very good. I sent my brother a gift that I thought he'd really like.
What a great day for your birthday!
But this year I'm ordering from 1-800-Flowers.com, and I'm going to send him a cake made out of fresh cut flowers. 1-800-Flowers.com is more than just flowers. There's lots of gifts for any occasion, like anniversaries or just because. When I use this special code, I'll even get 10% off of my order.
I'm Jim McCann from 1-800-Flowers.com. Visit us online or call us at 1-800-Flowers today.
You are about to experience the unsurpassed beauty of the world's most glorious music. Introducing Opera's Golden Moments, a magnificent new collection featuring 40 of the most popular songs from opera. Here are some of the best-loved songs of all time. Even if you don't understand the language, the songs project magical images and powerful emotions. These are pieces so popular, many of them have been featured in movies and television. You'll enjoy brilliant performances by the biggest names and greatest voices of opera. Almost 3 hours of the most well-known arias, duets, and choruses. Songs that touch the heart. Immerse yourself in feelings of warmth and serenity. So many of the world's most beloved artists. Opera's Golden Moments is not sold in stores. You can only order it through this special offer. Here's here's how to order. Call this toll-free number now for Opera's Golden Moments. 3 cassettes, $24.98. 3 CDs, $29.98. Plus $4.95 shipping. Have your credit card ready and call now.
Fresh waffles from Thomas's.
The Winook switched from frozen waffles to Thomas's fresh waffles. And things haven't been the same. Crispy, soft. In taste test, Thomas's fresh waffles beat frozen by 4 to 1.
Thomas's. Facts of Life by Lysol. Fact, with kids, you need all the strength you can get. Fact, Lysol Pine Cleaner is the best because it kills germs even in water. Pine Sol doesn't disinfect when diluted. Lysol stands strong. Life demands Lysol. That's a fact.
Watch Chief Meteorologist Barbara Shutt on 9 Eyewitness News.
Welcome back, 7:30 on this special edition of the early show. It's a day of mourning here in America, a day of remembrance. You're looking at the scene at St. Paul's Cathedral where a service is underway with the Queen in attendance, Prime Minister Tony Blair in attendance. This is part of the day of mourning. Europeans rather, standing solidly behind America on this day.
Sounds like the voices of angels just right there.
Pretty emotional stuff
we'll
on
hear
this
more of that
Friday.
throughout the morning.
Yeah.
Let's get now to our nation's airports. Most of the airports are up and running this morning around the country, but travelers are dealing with some tough new security measures. Mark Strassman is at Atlanta's Hartfield Airport this morning. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Jane. If what we're seeing here this morning is any indication, today is shaping up as a brutal day of travel for passengers. As most frequent flyers know, Atlanta is Delta's worldwide hub. Today, this morning, inside this terminal in front of Delta's domestic counter is the longest line of waiting passengers that I have ever seen. People are standing hundreds deep. It's a combination of more canceled flights today, rebooking since Tuesday's shutdown, and of course the new tougher security, in particular the ban on curbside check-ins. Everyone with a bag now to check has to go to the counter to check it, and this bottleneck is the result. The line is moving relatively quickly, but it is just so long that lengthy waits are inevitable. Elsewhere across American airports, places like Cincinnati, only a small fraction of the usual 40,000 scheduled flights in this country took off yesterday. America's aviation revival was off to a tentative start. A greater fraction of flights will take off today, but still only a fraction. In Phoenix, planes came and went until at one point security threats and nerves forced a temporary evacuation of the terminal. The same was true at airports in San Francisco and Orlando. This morning, all major airports are open except Boston Logan and Ronald Reagan National Airport in Washington. And now let's go on to New York, where here too all three airports that service the New York area are once again closed today. Only a fraction of flights were expected to leave anyway. Cancellations have been happening still, even after people have been issued boarding passes. Yesterday, of course, those airports were closed initially when federal agents took 10 people into custody. So there and even here where airports are open for passengers, it is still very unsettled and unsettling. It's a combination of the delays, the cancellations, the new tighter security, the apprehensions about safety. Across America today, Jane, it's going to make for a true test of patience, both for people flying and for those employees of the carriers trying to put people back into the sky.
Mark, when, if ever, will flights and airports get back to normal, the way we've known them to be?
It's never going to be back to the way we used to know it, of course, but here at least they're hoping that by this weekend to be up to about 70%, maybe 75, 80% by the beginning of next week. What I saw on the boards today, the number of canceled flights looked to me about at least 40%, for instance, of Delta's flights were already canceled, at least the ones that were on the board. It's going to be a long time, Jane.
All right, Mark Strassman, Atlanta's Hartsfield Airport. Mark, thank you. Concerns about airport security have risen to the forefront following Tuesday's deadly hijackings. Vince Gonzalez has a look at what can be done to protect the flying public.
Probably no one knows better than former Los Angeles police detective Bert Looper how easy it is to smuggle a knife onto a commercial passenger jet.
And I just tossed it in my briefcase along with my notebook.
Looper breached security at LAX in 1994 to test a theory in the O.J. Simpson case. Could Simpson have smuggled a knife onto a Chicago-bound plane? When Looper reported what he'd done to the FAA, he was surprised by the reaction.
The FAA was more concerned about this being revealed to the press and to the public as to the inadequacies of the security system at the airports.
Looper says as a result of FAA pressure, neither the jury nor anyone else ever heard about his flight with a knife.
The FAA chose to disregard the possibility that a knife or a weapon of any sort could have been put through the security checkpoints at any airline, in particular American Airlines.
One of the American Airlines jets involved in Tuesday's attack was hijacked by terrorists using knives. But experts say even if everything was done right with the security systems now in place, the hijackers might have still made it through. Even new security restrictions planned by the FAA may not be enough.
I think they're tepid and mild. For them to talk about plastic knives and curbside parking, to me, is, if it wasn't so tragic, would sort of be ludicrous.
As head of law enforcement for the Treasury Department, Martin Paulner helped found the Sky Marshals. For a few years, the anti-hijacking program put armed undercover agents on almost every U.S. flight.
They should reinstitute the Sky Marshal program that we had in the 70s, which was immensely successful, and there never was a hijacking on any flight that my agents were on.
The government announced that as air travel resumes, armed federal agents will be back on every plane. Experts say better technology is also needed. Checked luggage already passes through new high-tech X-rays. Now it may be the passenger's turn. When this Hollywood action movie was released, the idea of passenger X-rays was science fiction. This is the new reality, the body search system. It can see almost anything that can be hidden on the human body: drugs, guns, and metal or plastic knives. It's so detailed, for decency's sake, the model used in this photo had to wear lead-lined underwear. But some say a balance needs to be struck between saving lives and securing the right to privacy.
That we have to be very careful not to give up too many liberties in response to this type of attack, because in many ways such a response would really play into the hands of terrorists.
While body search is not used for general passenger screening yet, we tried to talk to the president of the company that developed the system. We were told he was unavailable in meetings in Washington. Vince Gonzalez, CBS News, Los Angeles.
The corporate headquarters for the health insurance giant Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield was located inside one of the World Trade Center towers. 1,900 of the company's employees made it out. Another 8 are still missing. Dr. Michael Stocker is the CEO of Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Dr. Stocker, good morning.
Good morning.
What can you tell me about the search for your 8 employees who are still missing?
We like to consider them still missing and in the present tense. We're still hopeful, although it's been quite a while.
Go ahead.
We were very fortunate. We were on the lower floors, and there's 100 stories about how the employees got out, but in fact, we got almost all of our employees out. The thing that, in the stories, that keeps coming back over and over again, because we're on the lower floors, the firemen were going up the stairs as our employees were coming down, and they were instructing people about how to get out of the building. Thousands of our employees got out because of them. And if there's a kind of a verbal history about what happened in the event, the firemen keep coming up over and over again. In addition to that, there's hundreds of individual stories about what employees did to help each other. They searched floors to make sure that everybody got out. We knew it was a building that had been bombed before, so we practiced evacuations, and it really paid off.
3 days removed from the collapse, is it tough to cling to the idea that the 8 will be found?
We still are keeping hope. We actually found 2 people yesterday that had not reported in, so we still have hope for the 8. We also had about 20 in the hospital. We still have 4 in the hospital. and we have hope for them too.
How are your employees, and how are you doing emotionally?
I'm okay. Work helps, but the employees have been incredible. The ones that are working in our headquarters temporarily worked all night the first night. You run on adrenaline in the beginning, then you get tired, and you have to actually tell them to go home and to pace themselves because we're going to be dealing with this for a long time. Most of our basic data is intact because it wasn't at the World Trade Center, and so we've been able to save that. We are wounded and hurt, but we are, by luck, much more fortunate than a number of other companies that were in the building.
Let me just pick up on something you just alluded to. So everybody who is a client of Empire Blue Cross Blue Shield, they need have no worries about their health concerns and their bills.
There will be delays when you call Empire Blue Cross and Blue Shield for a couple of days, but our basic data was intact. We lost about 2 days of mail, but most of our claims are electronic. It was handled at other facilities, so our basic operations are intact.
What about you? You were en route to Washington at the time. Does it scare you to think how close you could have come?
No, actually, I felt guilty because I wasn't there. It's just random. Most of the stories are random about who was there and who got out and who didn't get out. Actually, one of our employees stood and watched the building and called one of our other facilities and frantically instructed them about how to transfer command of the data to another facility before the building collapsed.
They had time to do that?
There was a few minutes between when the building collapsed and when the planes hit. The other employees seeing what happened at other facilities also transferred data to other facilities. Employees helped each other. We will take a long time recovering, but in fact, it's that history and tradition of how they helped each other which helps us.
Would you relocate when the time comes to another high-rise? Would you put your people back in it?
We have a lot to work through, but we're a New York company. We've been here since 1934. We're going to stay a New York company.
Dr. Michael Stocker, good luck in finding the aid.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck to you. Michael Kurtz has been keeping a constant vigil at his wife Louise's hospital bed after she was badly burned in the attack on the Pentagon. He's in Washington. Mr. Kurtz, good morning to you. Can you hear me, Mr. Kurtz?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you for a moment. First of all, how is Louise doing?
She's doing very well. Every day we're making strides. She opened her eyes up yesterday, and her swelling is starting to go away. And the staff here is very hopeful. She's in surgery every day now. And like I said, we're making strides every day, every hour, actually.
Can you walk us through the extent of her injuries and what happened to her? I understand this was all of her second day on the job?
Yes. I got a phone call about 1 o'clock Tuesday afternoon informing me that my wife was here at the Washington hospital and that she was in serious condition but stable. I was home with my daughter watching television, terrified like everybody else was, not knowing where my wife was. When I got to the hospital here, the staff was tremendous. They helped me walk up the stairs. Later to find out in the rest of the day that my wife had 70% burns over her body, proportional third degree, second degree, etc. And I stood there numb. As I had mentioned earlier in another conversation, I didn't even recognize my wife. A lot of complications in the first part of these situations, but now the swelling has started to dissipate, and she's, I know who she is, and I've always known who she is, but the first few minutes, it was total shock. It was, I couldn't believe a human body could go through such an ordeal and survive.
How much is she able to communicate with you?
Well, as of yesterday, we limited our yes and no answers because she was able to shrug her shoulders and bend her head, wiggle her feet for specific questions. She had a trach tube put in yesterday, and today we're hoping a little reading of the lips. She smiles a lot. After 31 years of marriage, I can almost anticipate some of her remarks. But I watch what I say. I gear the words again to yes and no answers, and I try not to frustrate her because she tires quickly. And we leave it like that for right now. I'm sure as the time goes on, we'll be able to communicate better. Her lips will get stronger so I can read her lips, and hopefully we'll walk out of here one day and press on with our lives.
Long-term prognosis, doctors giving you a target date of when that might be a reality?
Everybody's different, but the target point now could be 3 to 4 months. Once she gets out of the ICU, we'll start therapy, skin grafting, and it's on the person. I'm hoping 3 to 4, maybe 5 months to max. We're going to get through this day by day. She's my soulmate, and we're just going to make it. That's the bottom line.
I read that when you first saw this attack, you were mortified and you were shocked. At this point, any other adjectives you'd add? As I mentioned a moment ago, I was out exercising. I'd come home. I saw the first television clip of what had happened in New York, and I first thought an airplane had a problem and accidentally crashed into the building. And then, to my surprise, I watched the second airplane situation happen and unfold. And then I heard on the news there had been a bombing or something at the Pentagon. And of course, thinking my wife's second day, I went into sheer panic. And I had worked at the Pentagon a few years ago, so I was, familiar with the setup of the building. And when I saw where the impact was, I immediately knew that's where she was. I'd spoken to her the night before. I work a night shift. She works a day shift. And I looked at my daughter, who I'd brought home because of things I'd heard, and I immediately started to cry. And of course, my daughter, seeing me, started to cry. It just started a whole ball of crying. And, here we're trying to watch, trying to get intelligent. I'm hoping the phone's going to ring, that I'm okay. And we go through about a 4-hour ordeal not knowing what's going on. Wow.
Until, again, the staff at the hospital calls. So, yeah, it was tough.
Michael Kurtz, thank you. Our best to you and, of course, to Louise. Hang tough.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
7:46, Jane.
Brian, the emotional effects on the nation after a traumatic event like this will be long-lasting. Elizabeth Carl is a trauma psychologist who provided counseling during the Oklahoma City bombing, as well as the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. Dr. Carl, good morning.
Good morning.
How does this attack compare with other national crises in terms of mental health repercussions?
I think it'll be far greater than anything we've ever experienced. When we look at the death toll, which is anticipated to be 100 times that of the Oklahoma City bombing, and the length that it took for Oklahoma City of time to recover, will be far greater for New York City.
What are the normal emotions, the normal anxieties that people are feeling right now?
Certainly feelings of sadness, stress, crying, difficulty sleeping, eating, disbelief, anger, all of those mixed emotions coming together at different times.
And sometimes it comes in waves.
Oh, absolutely.
At least for me. I mean, one minute you're fine, and the next minute
you'll find yourself snapping to somebody or crying.
As the images of all this unfold on television, there's a real sense I hear from people of helplessness. What can I do? What should I do? How do you cope with that?
It's normal to feel helpless because our sense of security has been shattered. Doing things for other people brings us together. Just as the relief workers are able to do that, we can also do things within our own communities, donating time, donating food, helping our neighbors, because almost everyone has been impacted by this.
Well, is it good to return to life as normal as quickly as possible, or do you take some time, like you mentioned, to volunteer, to take time to talk about it, to comfort children or others who may need it?
It's important to take time to talk about it, but also to try and maintain as normal a routine as possible, and that varies with the individual. For some, they may need a lot more time to get back to what they would seem as a normal routine. For others, it may happen much more quickly.
To the extent that this feeling of despair exists among so many people, is walking the streets, home watching it in front of television. I mean, I guess that's part of the process of going through all this, is it not?
Yeah, we have to realize that it will take time for us to get over these feelings. And when we say get past the initial crisis and anger and despair. Down the road, we will always remember these feelings and feel sad, but hopefully we'll put it in a context of something more positive.
I get a real sense, Dr. Carl, that there's such a sense of solidarity a sense of patriotism among people in this country. People out buying flags, showing their support for the rescuers. Is there anything positive that comes out of it? If there is anything positive that comes out of something like this, is it that?
Oh, absolutely. In times of crisis, communities pull together, people pull together. We talk to other people. We care about people in a way that we don't show in everyday life. So that is very positive. And we also appreciate the sense of community and what others mean to us that perhaps we take for granted in everyday life.
What's the impact, Dr. Carl, of watching these images over and over and over again? It's one thing to see it once and the shock of that, but to see it again and again and again, what does that do to someone? What does that do to a nation?
That's very difficult. That's very difficult to do. And sometimes, certainly with children, we recommend that they not sit in front of the TV and watch it over and over again because it just plays in our eyes and of our minds. It's very difficult.
What do you recommend parents tell their kids? How do you recommend parents comfort their children who, we as adults can't understand, and you can only imagine what's going through the mind of a child?
The children can't understand either, but it's very important to tell them, although a terrible thing has happened and there are some evil people in the world, it's far more important to stress that there are many good people in the world, like the rescue helpers, the firemen, the mayor, everybody who is working together to help those that have been hurt.
Elizabeth Carl, it's good advice. It's good to see you again, too. Thank you so much for coming in this morning.
Me.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
More than 1,000 firefighters from around the country have come to New York to help. Among them are Chief Rick Martinez and firefighter Larry Savage, both members of the Sacramento Urban Search and Rescue Team. They're in Lower Manhattan this morning. Gentlemen, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I see you standing in the rain there. Can you tell me how the rain has affected your rescue efforts overnight?
Well, actually, the rain will help dampen some of the dust and particulate matter in the air, but it does make working on the site much more difficult because it's cold and it's wet.
It's cold and it's wet, but does the rain also affect the stability of the debris, of the rubble?
It adds to the weight of the buildings and or the rubble, and so that's a consideration that we take into account as we work.
I've heard this morning that the rain, if there are still people alive under all of that, the rain might quench their thirst and add to hydration. But is it also detrimental in the fact that it causes hypothermia?
Well, it is cooler, and hypothermia is a concern anytime you have people exposed to the elements, obviously. With respect to quenching their thirst, I wouldn't want to speculate on most of that. However, we're hopeful that we'll still be able to assist with the recovery of some.
Larry, I understand that you've been documenting the mission along with your rescue efforts with a video camera. As we roll some of this video, can you tell us some of the things that you've seen there?
Yes, I've been doing some video and also digital photography. I think you have some of the photos that we've taken. Basically, what I'm doing is documenting the event. Also, we use the pictures and the videos for planning so that we can hand it off to the next crews and kind of run a seamless operation.
Can you tell me what goes through your mind in a rescue effort like this, Larry?
Well, we train very hard for this, and we're actually pretty focused on what we're doing. We're basically thinking, working aggressively and safely to try and extricate the victims. At the same time, we're trying to be safe for ourselves. We're really, honestly, so busy that it's really hard to think about the overall situation, the incident. We just try and focus on our one little piece of it.
Rick, we were looking at just now pictures of the 2 firefighters that made it out yesterday from under the rubble. That must have been a moment of great happiness among a day of great sorrow.
Yes, I think, for all firefighters everywhere, this event, it affected our nation tremendously, and this event, in particular for firefighters and all rescue workers, had a personal attachment because I think anyone who witnessed the early moments of the incident, watched the fire knowing that firefighters and other rescue workers were coming to the scene, and then seeing the unfortunate collapse of the first building, watching on TV myself, I can tell you my heart went in my throat. I have friends that work for the New York City Fire Department, and I prayed for their safety.
Great leader. We're on.
But unfortunately, there were some casualties, as everyone knows by now.
Rick, I understand that you were in Oklahoma City helping with the rescue efforts there. This must bring back tremendous memories for you of that time, and if it could be possible, even worse.
Well, it does. I mean, Oklahoma City was terrible. Anytime that someone loses their life, it's terrible. It's made much more dramatic by the fact that this was intentionally done. As I said before, in this case, knowing firsthand that the rescuers that I know would be on the scene, it just made it more difficult. And obviously, it brings back memories. There were some positive things and positive relationships that came out of Oklahoma for me personally. But obviously, for all of us, this is not a pleasant thought or a pleasant time.
The conditions just look awful out there, and we wish you safety and comfort. And from someone from Sacramento, you're making us proud. Thank you so much. We're back after this.
Hi, I'm Mike Buchanan. In the news at 7:55, search crews at the Pentagon about 2 or 3 hours ago recovered both flight recorders from American Airlines Flight 77, which is buried in the Pentagon. The searchers got both the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder. Let me just tell you, now recoveries of the bodies and evidence is continuing at the Pentagon. This is a live picture at the Pentagon. The bodies of more than 70 of the 190 people missing have been recovered. Urban search and rescue teams expect to work at the site through Tuesday of next week. Today, weather could be a factor. Winds gusting up to 20 miles an hour are heightening concerns about the safety of those working inside the tangle of debris. Crews have been shoring up some areas as they pick their way through the rubble. And today, President Bush will be going to the National Cathedral, a day of prayer and remembrance for the victims of the terrorist attacks, both at the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. Let's do a traffic check. I can tell you last night, a friend of mine, Roger Stilwell, he left downtown near the White House at 5 o'clock. It took him 3 hours to get home because of new security measures. Here's Sherry Elliker.
Good morning, Mike. That's right. If you are traveling around the White House, you need to be prepared to show your ID. Make sure you take that with you because a lot of streets are closed off to both pedestrian and vehicular traffic. Let's take a look at northbound 395. Very heavy delays now in the express lanes from Glebe Road to the Pentagon. Traffic must turn right onto Army-Navy Drive from this ramp. You cannot get into the Pentagon parking lot. And keep in mind that Washington Boulevard remains closed between 395 and the Memorial Bridge. Let's go to Hillary now for a check on the weather. Good morning, Hillary.
Hi. It certainly is overcast outside, and there are a lot of showers around, mostly to the north and west, up in northern Frederick County, over toward Washington County and the panhandle of West Virginia. Take a look at temperatures. It's 63 degrees in Washington right now, but they are getting a lot colder. Expect a high of only around 70 degrees.
Watch sports with Jess Atkinson on 9 Eyewitness News.
The Civic from Honda.
Hey guys, can you help us? We need directions.
It comes with an extraordinarily well-insulated cabin.
Why is it so hard to meet chicks anyway?
The window! Hey!
I do not know.
Amazing, but true.
While supplies last, get special APR financing as low as 3.9% for 36 months on 2001 Civics.
This Saturday at every Macy's, it's Super Saturday. One super day of savings store-wide. Fabulous fall sweaters for her, 30% off. Bras from Warner's, Olga, Bally, Vanity Fair, 30% off. All kids' denim, dusters, sweaters, more, $14.99 to $27.99. Men's suits, sport coats, pants, buy one, get one free. Jessica Sanders bed in a bag, any size, $49.99. Macy's Super Saturday, plus a preview day Friday.
What's new at Marlowe? Delicious furniture, tempting prices, and for dessert, free financing, no finance charges, and no monthly payments until 2003. Free furniture until 2003. This Saturday and Sunday at Marlowe. Don't miss it. Marlowe, Washington's furniture superstore.
Kohl's anniversary sale is going on now, and we're celebrating with 20 to 50% savings throughout the store. Save on your favorite brand names like Sag Harbor, Dockers, Nike, and more. Save on our entire stock of sweaters and outerwear, shoes, and everything for your home. Plus, every time you use your Kohl's Charge through Monday, take an additional 10% off at Kohl's anniversary sale. Going on now. Kohl's, that's more like it.
You're watching live Doppler 9000 from 9 Eyewitness News.
The scene at Venerable St. Paul's Cathedral earlier this morning, that is actually the first time ever that the national anthem has been sung or played in St. Paul's Cathedral. And remarkably enough, Jane, it was written 187 years ago today, by Francis Scott Key.
That scene brings chills, as yesterday when the Queen's Band played the national anthem.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, and of course, as we should be, we've been focused on the losses here, but there were a number of British citizens who died as a result of the attacks in the World Trade Center. A number of people in the financial district who were at work in the World Trade Center and who are among the lost. I think they've put the number at close to 100.
People around the world sending peace and healing to those in the United States. Let's get the latest now this morning. President Bush has declared a national day of prayer and remembrance today. He will travel to New York City this afternoon to tour the World Trade Center wreckage. Vice President Dick Cheney, meanwhile, has been taken to Camp David for security reasons. Authorities now believe the death toll could top 5,000. Stock markets remain closed but are expected to be back in business on Monday. All major sporting events, including Major League Baseball and college and pro football games and all pro golf tournaments, have been canceled. And the Pentagon today plans to request the activation of reserve troops for homeland defense. Bryant?
All right, Jane, some jetliners have returned to the skies. We'll get to that story in just a moment. We also want to note that top officials now say the United States plans to launch sustained military strikes against those responsible for the terrorist attacks on our country. Let's go to the Pentagon, where David Martin has more on that first. David, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. U.S. officials now say that the evidence against Osama bin Laden is compelling. They don't seem to have made any effort to cover their tracks after the attacks. The hijackers used their true names when they boarded those planes, and those names have now been linked to Osama bin Laden. Immediately after the attack, other members of his organization got on their cell phones and started congratulating each other on having pulled off the attack, and those phone calls were intercepted by U.S. intelligence. So there's not much doubt here, and I think the clearest indicator of what the U.S. intends to do about it is the fact that the State Department has asked Pakistan for overflight rights for military aircraft, and that's important, of course, because Pakistan is next door to Afghanistan, which is where Osama bin Laden is believed to be hiding. Here at the Pentagon, early this morning, searchers found the two black boxes for the American Airlines jet which plowed into this building on Tuesday. The cockpit voice recorder is said to be in poor condition. The flight data recorder is said to be in good condition. It remains to be seen how much new evidence will be gotten out of either of those boxes, but they have now been turned over to the National Transportation Safety Board. Meanwhile, the search for bodies, the death toll estimate here is 190. The search for those bodies goes on. It was briefly interrupted last night when a pool of jet fuel flared up and firefighters had to be called in to put out the flames. Sometime today, the Pentagon expects to issue a call-up order for 50,000 reservists. The president has yet to approve it, but that's expected to happen today, and then Defense Secretary Rumsfeld will issue the call-up order. All of these reservists will be involved either in the cleanup after these attacks or in what is known as homeland defense, which is a phrase we're going to be hearing more and more of in the coming years. So these are engineers, MPs, flight controllers, flight crews, specialties like that, and they can be called up for a maximum period of 2 years, which I think is another and just one of many sacrifices this new war against terrorism is going to entail. Brian?
All right. David Martin at the Pentagon. David, thanks very much. Senator Robert Torricelli serves on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He's on Capitol Hill. Senator, good morning.
Good morning.
You said yesterday that the United States should declare a state of retaliation. Can you explain what that would entail?
Well, I think we're all grappling for new words in a new situation. I don't know that you can declare war on a series of clandestine organizations, but I think you can declare hostilities. And my suggestion is that this is not simply now a fight with bin Laden and a few training camps, but a series of interlocked terrorist organizations that may be based in very many places around the world. We should make our intentions known, because I think we're about to engage in sustained hostilities with these people.
You also said, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you said that this is not a law enforcement matter. Does that mean that we needn't or shouldn't bother with what we normally call due process in this country?
Well, actually, I thought I was giving private advice to the president. Apparently, it wasn't so private. But my point to the president was that gather evidence that convinces you, as a matter of conscience, that we know who did this, and then strike them. That the primary purpose here is not to gather evidence to bring to an American jury about bin Laden's accomplices. Obviously, we should prosecute them, and they should go to jail if we can apprehend them. But that's not the whole focus. The larger focus is to get at those who are complicitous, responsible, and have planned this. And that's not a Justice Department matter. That's a Pentagon matter. This is a military question. I think he has the same concept of this. We're on two tracks. But so far, the American public has seen what is largely an American law enforcement issue. That, I think, is not the whole focus of this operation.
It sounds as if you put a premium on or think it imperative that we do something sooner rather than later.
Well, I think that we're at a moment where we have the sympathy and the cooperation of the international community. It appears easy to ask Pakistan or Turkmenistan or Uzbekistan or Russia to cooperate in these matters, but these nations live in the neighborhood. These are dangerous people we're dealing with. Those who cooperate with us will have retribution against them as well, from internal enemies and external enemies. At the moment, we've got a good coalition. As soon as we're ready and this is planned, we strike. But I hope we also seize the moment and strike not against as an individual in a single camp, but there's not one of these organizations, but 6 or 8 or more of them around the world who, if they were not involved in this attack, were cooperative with it. And if not cooperative with this attack, were cooperative against the Cole attack or other instances. Let's take advantage of this moment and do as much damage to this terrorist network as we possibly can.
Let me make sure I understand you correctly. I mean, because the administration is going to great lengths to identify those responsible for these specific attacks. Are you telling us that we should use these attacks as an opportunity to go after any and everyone who has been associated with terror?
I think if you're going to break this network, we don't need to too finely draw the line. These organizations deal in concert. They help each other. And as one is destroyed, they spring up somewhere else in the world. This is not like attacking a country with a flag and a capital and a uniform. It is a network. It is in many places, and I think it needs to be broadly interpreted. That's why my advice to the president: get enough evidence that convinces you as an individual, as a matter of conscience, that we've got the people responsible. We don't have to get a unanimous verdict by a jury. We know who's been doing these acts for 20 years against the United States and Israel and other innocent parties around the world. We know who they are. This is our opportunity.
Do you think the president is, A, willing to be that aggressive, and B, do you think the public has the appetite for that kind of, I don't want to call it bloodlust, but revenge?
I think that these people who did this to the citizens of my state in New York and Virginia and elsewhere in the country have now filled this country with an enormous resolve. We can't bring back the dead. The damage is incalculable, but we can ensure this never happens again. And we owe that to the country. We owe that to our people. I don't think I'm asking for excess here. I need to tell the people of my state, as the president needs to tell people of the country, that 5 or 6 or 8,000 people may be dead, but it meant something. The country turned a corner. We're going to finally deal with this. We've got the resolve.
Senator Robert Torricelli. Senator, I thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. It's 8:10. Jane?
Bryant, down at the World Trade Center, there has been a ray of hope in the wreckage. Our national correspondent, John Frankel, has more on the massive rescue effort. He's in Lower Manhattan. John, good morning.
Well, good morning, Jane. We are going from one extreme to another. As you know, the last couple of days have been hot and humid and steamy, and the search and rescue teams have told us that they really can only work in 20-minute segments before they just tire out. They have to pace themselves, and this morning the conditions have grown much worse. It is cold as the temperatures drop. It is raining pretty hard, and that's going to continue on through the morning, and of course that's making it very difficult for the search and rescue efforts to continue. We want to show you some of the pictures that we've taken this morning as we've gotten down closer to what we have referred to as ground zero, what the search and rescue teams are calling the pile. They have continued to work on the perimeter areas and the larger pieces of debris that are there. They've been using torches and saws to cut through some of this stuff. Of course, the lightning hampered those efforts at times as well. The work that is being done a lot of times down on hands and knees and literally in bucket brigades, passing out the smaller pieces of debris, had to be suspended. It was just too difficult. And it was very hard to get up on top of the larger piles because of the footing just wasn't very good. So they couldn't work under those conditions. We've seen firemen who are just fatigued from working through the night. And day after day, as they've come down here not just once, but a second time and a third time. And the rain is really getting them down. Also, the hopes of finding survivors at this point. I mean, that has helped them keep going through these last few days. But now, as time goes on, their spirits are being dragged down. But they continue to work very hard. But even in this rain, we have seen them out in open doorways just catching a nap and taking a little bit of a break. As I walk down there, you can see the faces. They are fatigued. And right now, we are seeing a little more congestion as new crews come in. Those that worked overnight are leaving the scene. We don't know what this weather will do to volunteer efforts, though, and how many more people will show up today. Jane?
John, it looks just miserable. Thank you very much. President Bush has declared a national day of prayer and remembrance on this day, and will attend a memorial service in Washington at the National Cathedral. That's where our Diana Olick is this morning. Diana, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jane. The mission of the National Cathedral has always been to be the church for the nation, that is, for all faiths. And that's why President Bush felt it would be appropriate to begin his National Day of Prayer and Remembrance here. But due to the very high level of security around the president, of course, this will be a service by invitation only. That means it will not be open to the public, although later this weekend on Sunday, there will be a large service open to the public. Invited guests to this service will be, of course, members of Congress, members of the diplomatic corps, as well as members of the High Court, and also members of the police, fire, and rescue teams that have been working so very diligently over this tremendously terrible week. Also, there will be two very distinct messages given here by religious leaders. Number one is that they want to tell the nation that in order to begin this very difficult healing process, they need to keep their faith. But another message that they're going to be sending is to the leaders of the country, that they want them during these next couple of weeks to steer away from, quote, blind anger and hasty judgment. The service will be led today by the preacher, Reverend Billy Graham. Also, there will be several musical interludes includes including a performance by soprano Denise Graves. The service is expected to last about an hour, as the president will be heading off, of course, later this afternoon to New York. Jane.
Diana Olick, thank you very much. One of the key figures in this morning's service is the very Reverend Nathan D. Baxter. He is the dean of the Washington National Cathedral, where he is in front of this morning. Reverend, good morning.
Good morning.
We heard just a little bit from Diana what your message will be this morning. Can you tell us personally what it will be?
Well, we are gathering with the White House and their leadership in helping us plan this service to really do two things. We want to, first of all, remember that it's our faith that helps us to get through these kinds of terrible situations. The evil and the cowardice that's been visited upon this country is something that people have lived with in many other parts of the world, and we join the world community at this time, but it has been their faith that has sustained them. We are also gathering to say that the religious face of America is very diverse. There will be Jewish leaders, there will be Muslim leaders, as well as Christian leaders gathered to pray. And we are asking not only for the healing of the nation, but that our leaders might be guided as we move forward for justice, but not for revenge or rage.
Well, we heard Diana Olick mention that, and now that you say it, you want leaders to steer away from blind anger and, as you mentioned, rage. Can you expound on that a little bit, given what has happened,
Yes.
the enormity of what we've faced?
The feelings of grief and sadness and anger that we all feel, and I feel it myself, very human. However, the larger issue at hand is how do we respond in a just way that we not become the evil we deplore, and that we act in such a way that will lead us ultimately to a more safe society. And to act only out of anger stifles our judgment and causes us to lose some of the great character that we are as America. And I think our president understands that. He will be involved in the actual prayer and will be making a statement at the end of the service. But we are gathered together as a people, clergy, and political leaders and citizens in order to lean upon our faith.
We've seen the memorial services that are being held around the world today, and of course yours this afternoon. What role, Reverend, can prayer play in our country, in the world at a time like this?
I think, first of all, it plays a role in individuals so that prayer opens us spiritually, that we move beyond just the anger and the pain that we feel, but that we are in touch with the deeper values that we have. And as you can see, America is a wonderful country. We're a great nation. With this evil that's been visited upon us, to see the outpouring of goodness and love and courage that is happening all around this country, especially in this city and in New York. It says that people are in touch with their deep spiritual values of caring and respect. And so, yes, the pain is there and the anger is there, but prayer helps us to begin working towards a balance. And it will take some time, but it is a way that we begin by looking to our faith and our values.
Reverend, I just have a few seconds left, but I know the president will be there, of course, as we mentioned, and by invitation only many dignitaries. Are you at all concerned about security issues there at the cathedral today?
Yes, we are always concerned about that, and all is being done by the Secret Service and the Metropolitan Police and our own police force to be sure that things are secure. But a part of faith and a part of the courage of our democracy is that we refuse to be afraid, and that's what the terrorists want, and so we use all that we can to be encouraged to live in a way that is not unreasonably fearful.
The Very Reverend Nathan Baxter, my thanks for the comfort you've given already and will continue to give. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It is 8:17. Bryant?
President Bush has said that whipping terrorism is the new focus of his administration. He's vowed to devote all of our country's resources to retaliation. Philip Zelikow, a terrorism expert at the University of Virginia. Professor, welcome back. We're hearing a lot of stepped-up rhetoric. You heard Senator Torricelli talking about let's declare war on everybody who's been involved. In a logistical sense, in a practical sense, in a military sense, are we getting way ahead of ourselves here?
We may not be getting ahead of ourselves, Bryant, but the American people need to understand the implications of the objectives that the nation's leaders are describing. The nation's leaders are preparing us for a war in an area of fantastic difficulty for military operations. They're describing ending governments that support terrorism. That could mean literally ending the current government of Afghanistan.
Which then you have to set up another government. You have to find something to replace it.
That's right. And Americans, if they pull out their maps and find Afghanistan, they will find that we have no adjacent countries that are allied to us. We have no bases in any adjacent countries from which to operate. We could hardly pick a country in the entire world in which it would be more difficult for us to launch and mount and sustain the campaign people are talking about.
Pakistan on one side, Iran on the other, and obviously neither one is going to be receptive.
And former Soviet republics to the north.
So none of those very receptive to the deployment of U.S. forces.
Pakistan may grant us overflight for airstrikes, and that's one thing, and that may be very important. It may be very important very soon. But Pakistan is a staging area for large ground operations where we set up large bases in that region of Pakistan over a period of time would have profound effects on Pakistan's own government and its ability to maintain power if it tried to allow Americans to set up large-scale bases in their country that way. I'm not criticizing the administration's objectives, but I think it's important that the American people understand that this is not a problem that's going to be solved in the next few days with a bunch of airstrikes, and then we declare victory and we're done.
So airstrikes either by cruise missile or manned aircraft, those are not reasonable alternatives?
They will not be sufficient. In 1998, after the embassy bombings, we fired 70 cruise missiles at terrorist training camps in Afghanistan. And those blew up some buildings, and they killed a few terrorists in training. They did nothing to bin Laden's network. And the administration told the American people it was done, but that was a symbolic retaliation that did nothing to prevent what happened here. That kind of retaliation, that kind of strike, will not satisfy the president's objectives. The president has committed the country to far more than that, and the American people need to understand that this is going to take a long time and require military operations of a kind and variety that they can scarcely imagine right now.
Define long time.
At least weeks, and depending on the attitudes of local governments, possibly months of sustained preparation for large-scale ground operations in at least one area and possibly more of the Middle East.
And if that's what it comes to, should the American public at this point understand that if that's the objective, it is going to entail American casualties of a considerable nature?
It will entail American casualties if the country has to invade Afghanistan to overthrow that regime. And Afghanistan has been invaded before, and that's a difficult military problem, and there may well be casualties. The good news is that Afghanistan doesn't have the kind of army that Saddam Hussein deployed. But it's a very hard problem. When the president commits us to a sustained campaign, people need to hear what he's saying and understand what he's asking them to be ready to do.
Okay. Professor Zelikow, thank you.
Thank you.
Again. Jane?
Bryant, amid the tragedy and terror, Americans everywhere have been pulling together. From one end of this country to the other, a fierce sense of patriotism has been on display. Debbie Turner is in St. Louis with that. Debbie, good morning.
Good morning to you, Jane. You know, it is worth noting that as one of the worst weeks, if not the worst week in our nation's history comes to a close, American spirit and resolve is stronger than ever. If there can be anything positive to say about this tragedy, it's that it has galvanized a country. At dozens of rallies and vigils this week, from Boston to Detroit to Washington, D.C., there's a renewed sense of patriotism.
We're here to say America is standing together and that we care.
I think this shows that we're still strong and that we can still come together no matter how unfortunate the situation.
Like I said, this is our Army community. Okay.
Military recruiting offices across the country are reporting enlistment inquiries as much as 2 to 3 times the normal level.
I had considered it before, but the attack kind of was the impetus to bring me in here today.
On cars, on businesses, and on city streets, a familiar color scheme is back in fashion.
We figured if we could get people to hand these out, maybe patriotism will build up a little bit in the Stamford area.
The national symbol is so popular that stores are having trouble keeping them in stock. Walmart reports that it sold 116,000 flags on the day of the terrorist attack.
God bless America.
And on the steps of the Capitol this week, Congress expressed itself by spontaneously breaking into song.
God bless America. Somebody you love is gone. Who knows why, what for?
It's yet to be determined whether a religious and ethnic conflict was at the root of the attack. But at this prayer vigil last night in St. Louis, Missouri, the disaster had the effect of bringing people together.
Tell me why.
No matter who we are, in this country, together we stand, regardless to what race, creed, and color, together we stand.
I think it's incredible how all of us, how Americans have come together, really as one big family.
In New York, the last stages of the rescue effort continue. And though the rest of the country can only watch, there is a solidarity now. A solidarity that is evident everywhere. The U.S. House of Representatives, of course, has called on all Americans to display the flag as a symbol of solidarity. And if you don't have a flag, you'll be hard-pressed to find one. They're going fast. Jane?
Debbie Turner, thanks. Some viewers will cut away for local news. We'll be back after this.
Good morning, I'm Mike Buchanan. In the news at 8:25. Search crews at the Pentagon about 4 o'clock this morning found both flight recorders from American Airlines Flight 77, which is buried inside the Pentagon. Some other major developments. Also, investigators have recovered a black box recorder from the hijacked plane that went down in Pennsylvania. President Bush has designated today a National Day of Prayer and Remembrance. Mr. Bush is urging Americans to honor the victims with noontime memorial services, including the ringing of bells and with candlelight vigils this afternoon. We're going to keep you up to date on all the breaking developments in this story. Let's take a traffic check now. Sherry, you know, one thing I'm thinking.
What's that?
I don't think they're going to be reopening Pennsylvania Avenue to vehicular traffic anytime soon.
I don't think that's going to be in the works at all. No, I think that they're going to keep those closures in place. And as we mentioned many, many times, of course, they've extended the perimeter around the White House in terms of what's secure. So make sure you bring an ID and be prepared for that. You're looking at traffic trying to get to the Pentagon on northbound 395. Very heavy and slow traffic right now, especially on that ramp to Washington Boulevard. Police are alternating traffic where both ramps merge together to allow motorists to get onto Columbia Pike. Keep this in mind. You have to have a valid Pentagon or Navy Annex ID to get on there. Mike, back to you.
All right, for an update from the Pentagon, we're going to go to 9 Eyewitness News reporter Leslie Foster. Leslie?
Well, Buck, you also you mentioned that the headline for today is that the flight recorder and the cockpit recorder have been retrieved. Now to get an update on the status of the recovery effort, is Captain Scott Graham. You're joining us. I know you just got a couple minutes. Tell us what you've been doing overnight, and was that fire a major setback?
The fire wasn't a major setback. It did stop us for about an hour and a half. The fire was suppressed rather quickly. It was about a 20-minute knockdown. We have fire apparatus right here on the scene that's staged just in case this type of thing happens. If it happens again, we have the resources right in place to take care of it.
I know you've been shoring up, and quickly, is the wind going to be a bit of a problem for the recovery efforts today as you're in there?
At this point, I don't see it as being a problem. The weather cooling down is certainly going to help us because it's been pretty warm the last few days as the rescue workers were in there working. The wind at this point is not a factor. The rain won't be a factor. We have weather detection systems to pick up anything severe in the area, lightning, and at that time we'll make a decision whether we need to pull the rescue workers out or not.
Thank you very much, Captain Scott Graham, joining us just to give us a bit of an update. But again, they have been shoring up inside, trying to make sure it's stabilized so that they can access the most compromised part of the building. As you know, the headline today is that they have retrieved that flight data recorder and the cockpit recorder that is in the hands right now of the FBI, and the NTSB lab is analyzing that data right now. So that is the very latest from here. We'll bring you more updates as they become available.
Leslie Foster, thank you very much. We're going to join
go back to CBS joining in progress.
That's the sense that you get from people. It's just let's go out and get them.
I disagree. I disagree. I think there is a great willingness and an anxiousness to go on out and seek retribution for those who did this. I think if you talk to people about the idea of, oh, everybody and anyone who's ever committed any terrorist act, let's make sure we go wipe them all out right now, and let's strike and sort out the facts of it later. I'm not necessarily sure people are willing to have
that done. It was pretty harsh language from, who was it last night, from the Bush administration, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, who said this is not simply a matter of capturing people and holding them accountable, but removing their support systems and ending states who sponsor terrorism. That's pretty harsh language. Ending states who sponsor terrorism.
I understand that, but
that's just not missile strikes.
I understand that, but then where do you draw the line on that? I mean, do you count IRA terrorism in that?
Well, I don't think they're responsible for this.
No, but that's what I'm telling you. Torricelli is saying not just this, but anybody and anyone who has ever sponsored terrorism. That's what he's talking about. And I cannot believe that reasonable Americans have any degree of appetite for that kind of a sustained conflict.
I think they mostly have a focus for what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, for this. It's getting scary around here. What time is it?
It's 8:29.
8:29. We're back in a moment. Right, yes. Back at 8:30 on this Friday morning is on a day of remembrance, a day of national mourning, where the rain continues to pound down, complicating matters on the southern tip of Manhattan. You can see the Empire State Building there in the distance, and there you get a look at beyond the Empire State Building on the southern end where rescue and recovery operations are proceeding. Unfortunately, right now we're talking more recovery than rescue.
Can you imagine the conditions out there? It's just miserable to see those search and rescue men we talked to earlier under their umbrellas, and they're still out there working, still trying to do what they have to do.
Actually, we should count our blessings. We basically had 2.5 great days in which to work. I mean, actually the perfect days when people could work unhindered by the weather, unencumbered by the weather. Early this morning, the White House and congressional leaders agreed to the final details of a $40 billion package to help combat terrorism. Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton is on Capitol Hill. Senator Clinton, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
You're going to be making the trip with the president to New York later this morning. You've already been there, though, haven't you?
Yes, I have. I came up the other day with the director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency along with Senator Schumer. We toured the site with the governor and the mayor, and I'm delighted, just grateful that the president's going back this afternoon to see what I saw.
Tell us about the scene you saw, not just as an official, but as a New Yorker, as a fellow citizen.
You know, Brian, we helicoptered from LaGuardia, and of course the skies were still, there was no other air traffic. We came around the tip of Manhattan, and we were able to hover and look at the damage, the wreckage, the smoldering remains of the building. And I mean, I've just never seen anything to match it at all. There were people running as we were watching because they were afraid another one of the buildings was going to collapse. You know, it was as close to what I've imagined hell would look like as anything that I've ever heard of or seen in my own life.
You met in the Oval Office with the president, and of course you're standing with others on Capitol Hill in a show of unity behind the president.
Right.
But as the president talks of retaliation, have you any degree of concerns about how broad a retaliation or how unspecified a retaliation we're talking about?
You know, Brian, we are engaged in a very different kind of war than we've ever had before. I have confidence in the president, the administration, our military, to come up with plans that they believe will be effective against these networks of terrorists. You know, this is not by any means something you can just snap a finger about, make an order about. This is very difficult and challenging in countless ways. I know that from, you know, my husband's own experience. I think we have to be patient and resolute and see, you know, what the plans are and how they're carried out.
But Senator Torricelli was with us moments ago and was talking about using this as an opportunity to go after not just those who were involved in these strikes, but any and all who've essentially ever been involved in any terrorist incidents. Is Congress, is the Senate willing to give the president that broad a mandate?
You know, I think most New Yorkers, and certainly most Americans, want us first and foremost to go after those who perpetrated this evil act, and everyone who gave them safe harbor or financial assistance or any kind of support. I think we have to focus on the immediate and clear and present danger that we face. As recent news accounts have demonstrated, and as I've been informed, you know, we're still making sure to round up anyone who possibly could be part of the terrorist network that aimed these attacks at the heart of our country. So I would put my resources and best efforts behind going after those who caused this particular attack and loss of life. And let's see what we can do there. Now, if it leads to others who are involved or an ally with them, then I think we should take a look at that.
Senator Torricelli and others have talked about convening, after all this is done, convening a board of inquiry to hold those accountable at CIA and NSA and FBI for what he viewed as a monumental failure of our intelligence community. Do you view it as a failure?
You know, Brian, I'm sure that in retrospect, there were steps we should have taken, measures that might have proven effective. But let's not underestimate the enemy against which we are now fighting. It is very difficult, and I think, frankly, until Tuesday, it was unimaginable the kind of measures and security precautions that we might have to live with for the foreseeable future. So I'm focused on the here and now, on getting the resources that we need in New York, in supporting the administration and the work that the president is undertaking. If there is a useful purpose to be served in trying to find out what we could have done and make amends for that so that we never, ever suffer these grievous losses again, then I would support that in the future. But right now, let's focus on helping try to continue the rescue and recovery efforts and, you know, provide the help and support that people who lost their family members and loved ones and their jobs and the devastation that we know has occurred. Let's help deal with that first.
Your husband, former President Clinton, was in Australia at the time of the attacks, and I know that President Bush sent a plane to secure his safe passage back home. What has he been saying about this to you?
Well, you know, he's outraged. When I reached him in Australia, he was heartbroken and angry. He supports the president. He knows many of the people personally. He's worked with many of them professionally. He has confidence in their resolve and their planning. So he's giving full support to our country in a united way. You know that he went down to visit with some of the victims and the rescue workers just as a tangible show of support and appreciation, gratitude for the sacrifices that have been made.
All right. Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, you have a busy day ahead. We wish you safe travels. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
All right. It's 8:37, Jane.
Thanks, Brian. Hundreds of family members have been keeping vigil in the hopes that their loved ones will be found in the Twin Tower wreckage. But often the news they hear is far from comforting. Tracy Smith is at St. Vincent's Hospital in Lower Manhattan. Tracy, good morning.
Good morning, Jane. You know, over the past 24 hours, there have been reports and rumors of miracles. Survivors who are trapped in the wreckage since Tuesday walking out on their own or using cell phones to call their family members. But of course, all of these reports have turned out to be inaccurate at best. For friends and family of the missing, it has just been a roller coaster of hope and despair.
At the city's main missing persons center, a growing sense of frustration.
We haven't been able to confirm anything. So even if there are John Does in hospitals, that's what we want to hear. We want to know where those hospitals are, and we want to call those hospitals. But for some reason, that information is not available. And it's really quite frustrating.
With flyers and photos, they're putting a human face on an impersonal tragedy, one face at a time. Most of them refuse to believe that the worst has happened, even though they've been asked to provide details like identifying marks and dental records.
I don't want to give up hope until I know for sure one way or another. Any hope or anything, page me, call the house, call anybody, call Collect if you have any information.
Please give us a call at 718.
Nearly all of them give out phone numbers. In this heightened atmosphere of desperation, they're praying for the phone to ring and dreading the moment when it does.
Hello? Did somebody just call my phone? Yes, it is. Thank you very much. Thank you. I will.
Allison,
thank you.
Allison, what happened?
It was just somebody saying that she saw us on TV and her thoughts and her prayers are with us, and she knew somebody too.
It's gonna be alright. She gotta be somewhere. She gotta be alright.
I've seen this happening over and over again. People trying to encourage each other, clinging to every bit of information, still holding out hope that some piece of good news will turn out to be true. Jane?
Tracy Smith in Lower Manhattan. Thanks. Rescue efforts have been called off at the Pentagon, and search crews have now begun the grim task of recovering the rest of the 190 bodies of those who are believed to have died in the attack. At least another 90 people were injured at the Pentagon. Dr. Marion Jordan is the director of the burn unit at the Washington Hospital Center, and Barbara Brown is a flight paramedic who helped medevac the injured from the Pentagon. There in Washington, Dr. Jordan, Ms. Brown, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Jane.
Ms. Brown, let me start with you. I understand you answered the phone call that came into the center, the initial call about the crash. Can you describe that conversation?
Well, it's essentially a party line of about 4 or 5 institutions on one line connected directly to the National Tower. And the individual at the tower basically stated that a plane had just flown into the Pentagon. And from that point on, there was just screaming into the phone, just a lot of chaos.
And initially, you did. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I just relinquished it to my supervisor to the right of me and went and pre-alerted the other managers on the unit.
And initially, you thought it might be even a drill. You didn't believe that something like that could happen.
Not with what had just happened in New York. I just kind of said, I don't believe this is a drill. I couldn't imagine them doing something like that within an hour of what happened in New York.
Yeah. You got to the scene, Ms. Brown, and can you describe the initial chaos that you saw on the ground?
When we first landed, we actually had people going across our landing zone, so it caused a little bit of a delay to get on the ground. But once the flight nurse that I was with, Tammy Royce, and the veteran pilot that we had with us that day, Ted Chittick, once we established ourselves on the ground safely, we had people going in just 50 different directions. We really had no idea which way to go, so we just started heading towards the Pentagon and just worked our way around the periphery until we got some people from the Pentagon, two gentlemen who came over to help us with our equipment and took us over to the medical sector to the right of the attack site.
Mm-hmm. And what was the condition of the victims that you first saw on the scene?
At that early stage, because we're looking at about maybe 40 minutes after the impact actually happened, a lot of the most critical people who couldn't get out were still in the Pentagon. So a lot of people that were running around the site and fleeing from the Pentagon had burn injuries, minor burn injuries, but they were at least able to get out with, and a lot of smoke inhalation, heated gas inhalation injuries, which over time, in that kind of time frame, can precipitate to a critical patient, and that's what we eventually ended up with about 30 minutes later.
Dr. Jordan, many of those patients were rushed, of course, to your hospital into the burn unit. Can you describe their condition when you saw them?
We received initially six patients, among 3 or so helicopters and 1 ground unit that came here. Within a matter of 45 minutes to an hour, we had them assessed for basic injuries. We had determined that most had smoke inhalation and had secured airways with intubation tubes, and had actually moved them out of our receiving unit on into the intensive care units. We did not know what to expect and did not know whether we were going to get 5 patients or 500 patients at that point.
And someone noted that the silence in the burn unit was really unusual, that these patients weren't saying anything. What did that tell you?
I'm not sure that I understand that. The patients that I saw initially as they came in our emergency receiving unit, a couple of them already had airway tubes placed. The others were actually able to say a few words to us.
What I read was that most burn patients come in screaming in pain, and that these people came in and weren't saying anything, and that meant that they were in extreme shock, and that said more about their emotional state than as much as it did their physical condition.
I think that's fair assessment. The other thing, though, is that with today's emergency medical systems and the responses and the trained people that we have, like Barbara and Tammy, they have the wherewithal to begin to administer narcotic pain medication before the patient actually arrives to us. So hopefully they're in a already reasonably pain-comforted state by the time we see them.
Can you tell me a little bit about President Bush's visit to the hospital yesterday?
I can, and I'll try to keep my voice together. I tried to describe this yesterday afternoon to a few people. This was one of the most moving experiences I've ever seen. The President and the First Lady came by, went to our burn intensive care unit and then to our burn intermediate care unit, visited each room, and I'm sure that 2 weeks from now, each of those patients will testify that they stayed 15 minutes at minimum in the room because there was no sense of urgency expressed by either of them. There was a genuine caring. There was an incredible amount of human and personal embracing that the two of them did to each of these patients with where appropriate, and we had most of the patients awake and alert. If the patient was responding and was able to come up with any kind of an indication that they were doing well or a smile, a lighthearted comment, the families were all given reassurance by them, and the staff then was thanked, which was a real lift for our staff, who are working 24 hours a day, obviously, to take care of these patients.
I'm sure they are. Well, many thanks to you, Dr. Marion Jordan, for your work, and Ms. Barbara Brown, thanks to you for what you did on the scene there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. 8:45. Bryant.
All right, Jane. When the rescue and recovery operation of the World Trade Center has been completed, and it will be, an enormous cleanup effort will begin, one with a lot of potentially dangerous hazards. David Harvey is the vice president of Tradewinds, an environmental restoration company that has already been hired by several private companies to try to help with the job. Mr. Harvey, good morning.
Good morning.
Your company supplies equipment, manpower, training?
That's right. That's right. We supply, we actually have about 1,000 people on standby with all types of equipment, specialized equipment, to do any type of hazardous cleanup or restoration of the buildings.
So essentially, when do you begin? When do you figure?
Well, we've actually already begun. We've been down there with 30 to 40 people working around the clock with the utilities to decon any of the people and the workers that have been coming out of the contaminated, of the damaged area.
You're experienced at this, obviously, and have a great deal of broad experience. Have you ever seen anything like this scene down on the southern tip of Manhattan?
We have seen a lot, but this for us, I mean, it's pretty much unprecedented.
What's it like?
It's there's just buildings that are melted, the faces of buildings that are melted, devastation, destruction. Passing by a morgue, a makeshift morgue, it's a harrowing experience, and it's very difficult for the people that are working there. But it makes them more determined to do their job.
Yeah. What are some of the primary hazards as you look to the task ahead of you? What do you see as the primary obstacles, the primary challenges?
Well, some of the challenges are the actual stability of the areas that you're cleaning, so that the workers, again, don't get buried in any collapse.
But I'm assuming you won't be allowed there until they have either been brought down or been declared stable.
That's true. But you know, we would have somebody on the team to make sure, you know, a structural engineer, things like that. Also, any environmental hazards, let's say asbestos or...
Is asbestos going to be a problem? We were speaking here yesterday about some of the particles that were in the air and whether or not that was a considerable problem.
Well, I think EPA had taken some samples, and I think some had come up positive, some had not. We would take samples in any of our buildings and to ensure that what type of protection we would have for our people and what type of level of cleaning we would do within the buildings as well.
Right now, are you basically looking at this as a cleanup operation, not a restoration?
It's first a cleanup operation, then a restoration.
What's going to be restored?
Well, there are some buildings that are intact. Not intact, but that are not damaged to the extent of demolition. So we would be able to rebuild whatever is in there, hopefully after we've been able to clean it. There's some, we've been working, we actually, before we were evacuated, when the stability of some of the buildings were in question, we were actually working in some of the buildings there, cleaning some of the buildings on the periphery.
It's only been 3 days now. When were you called in?
We were called in the day after.
So you were called in on Wednesday?
Yes.
And you started working then?
Yes.
What are some of the obstacles you face down there? You mentioned asbestos. You mentioned the instability of some of the construction. What else?
Well, I think, you're dealing with, I think, a lot of different potential hazards. They could be from debris, from maybe even biohazards, unfortunately, from, some of the and some of the sewage and things like that from sewer pipes, flooding. There could be any number of things.
I'm looking here. You were also been hired by Con Edison, the gas and electric company, here in New York. Right. Is that an ongoing capacity? You're assisting them right now. Is that an ongoing problem?
Well, what they're doing is they're actually doing decontamination of their vehicles, taking dust off, and actually working with the fire departments and the police departments to help them assist deconning their trucks and their personnel.
Yeah. Silly question is, you take all this stuff away, where are you putting it?
Well, you would put it in registered landfill sites if you have to. Whatever is deemed to be hazardous, you would have to bring it to the appropriate disposal site.
Yeah. When do you figure you'll be done?
This could take weeks, if not months.
You figure you'll be working through the end of the year?
I believe so.
Mr. Harvey, thanks so very much.
Thank you.
Good luck to you, sir. This week's tragedy has helped make Angus Cress Gillespie's latest book a bestseller. 2 years after it was first published, his book, Twin Towers, has now topped one prominent book list. Mr. Gillespie, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's first of all note that yours is not a novel.
No.
It is basically a look at what the Twin Towers have come to mean and what they've come to symbolize.
That's true.
Before we talk about the book itself, it must be a very eerie feeling to have unwillingly profited greatly from such a horrible catastrophe.
Yeah, it's a bizarre situation because I'm proud of the book. I think it's well...
You were proud of it before the attack, before Tuesday's attack. Let's make note of that.
So I'm proud of the book. I think it's well written. I think it contains a lot of useful information. I hope that it's a suitable tribute to the victims of this tragedy. At the same time, I'm very embarrassed that this occasion triggered all the attention.
Yeah. Why had the Twin Towers become the cultural icon they had?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of interesting and curious because that was a central point of my book. In the book, I argue that just as Big Ben represents London and England, and just as the Eiffel Tower represents Paris and France, so the Twin Towers represented America. And my reasoning was, well, it's in close proximity to Wall Street, so by extension, it represents American capitalism and consequently the entire American way of life.
To your mind, had they surpassed the Empire State Building, which had been on the landscape for an awful long time and was arguably as famous?
Well, Brian, I want to be fair. It is true that the Empire State Building held the record in height for some 40 years, but there is really no comparison because if you look at volume rather than just height, true, the Twin Towers eclipsed the Empire State Building in terms of height, but if you took the entire square footage of the Empire State Building, it would not have filled the 2 sub-basements of the Twin Towers.
So you're talking about really a grand structure.
Yeah, because each floor of each tower was about an acre in size. So, you know, we talk about a pair of skyscrapers, but it would really be almost more meaningful to talk about a city unto itself.
We sat here in amazement on Tuesday to realize that these 2 structures could be brought down within 2 hours.
It took 6 years to build.
After they were first hit.
Yeah.
As you watched what unfolded Tuesday, what'd you think?
I didn't believe it because I knew that the buildings had been built to withstand the impact of a jetliner, and they did.
2 jetliners.
Yeah, and they did stand up. The problem was all that excessive fuel, which burned and created these intense fires, and in fact melted the steel.
Did you realize
nobody ever foresaw?
Did you realize as you were watching this and watched those fires burn? Did you have an inkling that the towers would go, or did you till the end?
No, till the end. I thought, well, the fire department will come, and they'll put out the blaze, and this is going to be a big mess, and it's going to take a long time to clean up. But never in my wildest dreams did I think that they would collapse. I mean, nobody ever thought of, not only just me, but the structural engineers themselves never considered this possibility. It's just mind-boggling.
Do you think they'll be rebuilt? I was watching yesterday, last evening, there was a construction worker down there who was making a plea that when it's cleaned up, let's rebuild them, almost as an in-your-face to others.
Well, as somebody who spent 10 years of his life working on this book, nothing would please me more than to have them rebuilt exactly as they were. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think, in fact, these Twin Towers were a grand anachronism. It's no longer necessary to have this agglomeration, this congestion, because of several reasons. First of all, environmentalism. The federal and state environmental agencies now have teeth in their regulations, whereas these objections could be brushed aside before. Also, here in New York City, we have neighborhood empowerment. And if local groups raise objections, they're taken seriously. Furthermore, who would be a tenant in such a building? And who would insure such a building? I don't think it's going to happen.
Angus Kress Gillespie, the book is Twin Towers. Thank you, sir.
My pleasure.
Good luck to you. Yeah. We're going to come on back in just a moment. There's more ahead after this.
Good morning, I'm Andrea Roan.
And I'm Mike Buchanan. In the news at 8:55, President Bush is calling on the nation to come together today in memory of thousands of victims in Tuesday's terrorist attacks.
The president has declared today a national day of prayer and remembrance. 9 Eyewitness News reporter Frank Herzog is live at the Washington National Cathedral. Frank?
Andrea, Mike, about 3 hours from now, this cathedral will be filled. The president and First Lady will be here, members of Congress, I assume members of the Supreme Court, all gathered in a prayer of remembrance and a vigil. It is one of 15 ceremonies that will be conducted throughout the Washington area today. I wish I could tell you more about the festivities, but the White House was printing up the programs for this, the schedule of who would speak and when, and they had to be evacuated for a short time yesterday afternoon, and because of that, the programs haven't gotten here yet. Cathedral officials are still waiting. Security is tight, rings the entire cathedral grounds, and we expect it to get even tighter as noontime approaches. And again, it'll be the president and the First Lady leading a national prayer vigil that will begin here at the Washington Cathedral at noon. And we'll have more a little later in Eyewitness News at 9. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Frank. And again, this is an invitation-only service. An Arlington County official says the discovery of the black boxes in the wreckage of the Pentagon plane crash is a significant development.
Assistant County Manager Dick Bridges says the cockpit voice recorder was described to him as, quote, somewhat damaged, and that the flight recorder was charred. Investigators are hoping they can provide some good look at what happened in the last moments before that plane dove into the Pentagon. Sherry Elliker with the traffic report.
Good morning, Mike and Andrea. Some of the heaviest traffic we're seeing this morning happens to be on northbound 395 traveling over to the Pentagon. Let's take a look live. We're seeing very heavy and slow traffic on 395, beginning back at Glebe Road, getting to the Pentagon. The ramps from 395 to go to Columbia Pike and Fort Myer are open, but you must have a valid Pentagon or Navy Annex ID to get in. Let's take a look at the weather now with Hillary.
Cast and temperatures have been...
J.C. Hayward and Bert Schuck to 95 on 9 Eyewitness News.
Diamonds. The Jewelry Factory is a direct diamond importer. The Jewelry Factory has thousands of diamonds, most with GIA or EGL certs, laser inscribed and guaranteed the lowest price. 1-carat solitaires are $5.99. 1-carat studs $3.99. The Jewelry Factory has thousands of rings, pendants, earrings, and bracelets, and specializes in platinum and invisible settings. Only the Jewelry Factory gives you a low price and double value guarantee. Buy Factory Direct, the jewelry factory in Bethesda.
Let's see, Monday we can have rice cakes.
Or a Campbell's chicken noodle.
Ooh, chicken noodle.
You always knew Campbell's was good.
Tuesday, cottage cheese.
Or Campbell's vegetable beef.
Veggie beef. What's going on? Wednesday,
Campbell's tomatoes.
And over 30 savory Campbell's soups have under 100 calories and 3 grams of fat or less per serving. Every bowl, good.
Next Monday, New England clam chowder.
I knew that.
Campbell's, good.
Last year was not very good. I sent my brother a gift that I thought he'd really like.
What a great day for your birthday.
But this year I'm ordering from 1-800-Flowers.com, and I'm going to send him a cake made out of fresh cut flowers. 1-800-Flowers.com is more than just flowers. There's lots of gifts for any occasion, like anniversaries or just because. When I use this special code, I'll even get 10% off of my order.
I'm Jim McCann from 1-800-Flowers.com. Visit us online or call us at 1-800-Flowers today.
Bring it in, fellas. Here we go. Come on, hustle up now. Come on. Here we go. Oh, there you go. There you go. Hit the pad. Hit the pad. There we go. There we go.
For a fast appointment with a great doctor, call 202-877-DOCS.
The Washington, D.C. region has been recognized for the work ethic, productivity, and skill of its workforce. The exceptional quality of our labor force has played a significant part in the achievements of our home and our country, and we continue to grow through the pride of the people who make this hometown work.
AmeriClean Services Corporation specializes in air duct cleaning and indoor air quality for both residential and commercial properties. We are a NADCA certified company with over 18 years of experience, offering a variety of cleaning services. Visit us at AmeriClean.com.
Watch Chief Meteorologist Tom Burchett on 9 Eyewitness News, where local news comes first.